So, unless you've been living under a rock, that headline will not surprise you. Dueling realities amid multiple crises, Trump and Biden supporters see different priorities and futures for the nation. Not new. This was written in October of 2020. Um, you could, you know, write similar headlines about Trump and Clinton. You could write similar headlines during midterms. We are living in a very divided nation, and this comes directly from the Public Research Religion Institute, which looks into basically politics through the lens of religion. But this is a really detailed, data-driven journal entry about the different concerns for each party, and it really just highlights how divisive the times are. And I'm walking through here. Republicans have more friends across the political divide than Democrats, study finds. So Democrats are ending relationships with Republicans. Again, unless you've been kind of completely dismissed from politics over the last, I don't know, 5 years or so. Um, this will not come as a surprise to you. There's a blog entry. Do you actually have to cut off your Trump supporter friends? There are so many of these all over the internet. Um, Another blog. I spent the day blocking friends and family members who supported the riots in D.C. This guy's cutting off everybody who supported the riots. That one, I gotta say, uh, eh, that's fair game, in my opinion. Um, Another one from the Atlantic. Trump's presidency is over. Many relationships. So this details multiple relationships that have ended because of Trump. I'll share that one in my post, as along with a few of these other ones. Reuters, you are no longer my mother. A divided America will struggle to heal after Trump airs out. That's very sad. And then finally, NPR with a little podcast here. Dude, I'm done. When politics tears family and friendships apart. So that one was specifically related to me because 4 years ago I could have wrote that headline. My best friend and I had a very different opinion about the political climate of the time, and we are sadly no longer friends. So you kind of get the idea of what I'm covering here, which is uh, politics as it relates to relationships and uh, the ethics of cutting somebody out of your life because of politics. So, yeah, severing ties, the ethics and outcomes of political discourse. Um, and I'll start with Aristotle. All right, so right here you have four of his virtues, right? I try to pick four that specifically related to this topic of ending relationships, and I start with righteous indignation. And I think if you're applying that directly to the situation, it is righteous to stand by an opinion that you believe is objectively good. And I do believe that mine is. And it's okay to have that difference of opinion, I think. So Aristotle would support the discourse, but maybe not support um, abandoning a friend. I'll take a quick caveat here. It's important to note that I'm not talking about somebody who is inherently racist with like that kind of wrong-mindedness, or somebody who's down at the Capitol, rioting in the Capitol building. That's unlawful. So removing those types of people from your life, I feel like everybody has to make their own decisions in this instance. Um, but criminality is criminality, and racism is wrong, right? I hope as a society we can acknowledge that. So this is more akin to somebody who has value, who you love, who just perhaps is, just not agreeing with you, or maybe if you want to go further, as I would, um, on the wrong side of history with some of their ideas. Some of it can be generational, situational. It can be the economics. It can be media driven. There's a lot of different ways for this to happen. Anyway, so the next uh, virtue, patience. Is it right to become upset when the beliefs of a friend are revealed to be wrong or wrong-minded? Let's say we're not talking about objective wrong. something like lack of empathy, mistrust of the government, mistrust of the media, science, health organizations, etc. Or is it wrong to lose patience with someone you love? I think that's a pretty clear cut one. It's wrong to lose patience with someone you love, even when you disagree with them. Uh, Courage. This is, Aristotle's most famous example of achieving the golden mean. Um, is it courageous or rash to express opinions that may make others uncomfortable, but you feel are righteous and important? That's courageous, but that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is you're dismissing a friendship or a relationship of any kind in this instance, and that's rash behavior for sure. And finally, truthfulness, which will segue nicely into Kant. And I have to mention all of these examples come directly from our text, um, uh, through Aristotle's explanation of virtuous. I think it was book two, if I remember correctly. Um, so it's obviously truthful to be honest, and if you're engaging in discourse around politics, honesty, or any discourse really, any debate, honesty should be at the heart of any discussion. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't be honest and that you shouldn't engage with people. I don't think that any uh, philosopher would say that. That's mock modesty, actually. Now that I think of it, um, but again, I suppose in this instance, it's still truthful to cut the relationship off, but it fails the other virtue tests. But truthfulness does segue very well into Kant, right? The ontology. I really specifically focused on Kant, who said it so bluntly that you just don't lie. And if we just start there and stop there, um, Kant would have people argue about this in circles until the point was either dismissed or accepted, which is unlikely right now, obviously. Um, and potentially, maybe the relationship's ended by the opposite party. It's not going to make you a very pleasant party guest. You're not winning any congeniality awards, that's for sure. And then kind of going through some of like more formulaic parts of the ontology through Kant, the goodwill, in Kant's opinion, again, directly from the text, Kant's opinion, the goodwill is inherent in all of us, and wishing to do the right thing. So I would say that this holds up to that test. Duty's a little dicier, famously used during the Nuremberg trials, right? The Kant idea of duty. He meant it as like following your own moral code. That's dicey, right? Um, First, you have to actually identify what your moral code is, which most people probably haven't done. Um, I put a question mark there because if righteousness is a part of your moral code, uh, potentially this is the right thing to do, right? Insulating yourself from these kind of from different ideologies from you. Although I'll get into that a little bit further. Then universality or universality. Uh, can this idea be applied universally? And this is where I think it really fails the test, right? Because if everybody does this and broadly dismisses anybody who they vehemently disagree with, then you ultimately end up with a small circle of friends, um, or whatever, small circle of like-minded people who will not test you, and that's not a area where any growth can come, uh, or can be expected. Now, I think that that's happening to some extent, right? Disclosure: I'm a digital marketing consultant by trade, um, but I think that everybody should get off of Facebook, just because it's really cancerous. Not even just Facebook. Social media in general really has done a tremendous job of insulating us all to be surrounded by people that we agree with all the time. You're just seeing your own opinions reflected back to you, and I think that's how we got into this mess in the first place. So universality does not apply here. Um, so we'll move right on to consequentialism, which I've said in my life. I've always said that I'm a bit of a utilitarian. Um, what's good increases pleasure and diminishes pain. Moral worth is akin to consequence outcomes. I agree with that. Although I will say that the biggest challenge to consequentialism and utilitarianism is that it doesn't necessarily apply to situations like this. I think it's a great spot for uh, legislature. Like people who are building laws should pay attention to this. Um, trying to apply it to this specific dilemma. Um, in moral worth of an action is the consequence, right, of the action. So ending a relationship is less frustration for the person who ended it. At the ending the relationship, you lose a friendship. So I mean, me just doing this shows that that fails the test. There is a regret of how that all happened, um, and I know, you know, via the, via rumor, come actually directly from the source that. I'm sorry, my dog is hungry. I don't know. Who knows? Uh, coming directly from the source, this loss of friendship on both of our ends has caused some ripple effects, more so for him than for me. Um, but so if we're talking about the moral worth of those consequences, it fails that test. Um, dig into utilitarianism is cutting off friendships, forcing introspection among the people left behind. I don't think so. We talked about echo chambers. I think that's what's happening. Are we also insulating ourselves into an echo chamber? Yes, frankly, we definitely are. And kind of keep on going through these tests of consequentialism, and from the text from professors' YouTube videos. What's good increases happiness in the greatest number. I don't know that that can be easily applied to this or meaningfully applied to this specific instance. It's difficult to measure pain and pleasure. But I've already admitted that nothing was gained. I mean, in instant relief, uh, the idea that my family wouldn't have to be surrounded by ideas that I disagree with at that point in time created relief. Um, in retrospect, that seems kind of silly. Um, I mean, I guess by doing this, I'm admitting that nothing was really gained. Um, maybe some venting of frustration, and then digging into true hedonism, like through Bentham. Um, so we're talking about intensity, the intensity of the pleasure or pain. I would say that it's not intense, right? It's kind of this dull, long pain, but the pleasure was certainly less than that. It was a couple days of a high. Like this backlash towards political outcomes that I did not agree with. Duration, I mean, we're talking 4.5 years. We're talking about it now, right? So there's duration as it continues. Certainty, I can tell you that it's certain that it happened. Again, this is very anecdotal, but it's the only real uh, resource I have in this particular venue. Propinquity, a word that I was not familiar with until Bentham. How far off is pleasure or pain? It was immediate for the pleasure, the pain has lingered. Fecundity, another word that is not common. Bentham introduced me to that one as well. Will this pleasure lead to other pleasures? No, it did not. Purity, probability the pleasure will lead to pain. It did lead to pain. Extent, how many people are affected? And that's a tricky one, right? Because anecdotally, very few people were affected, a handful. Um, but if you kind of apply the idea of universality to this situation, um, you see that if everybody acts this way, and I think a lot of people are, you do develop these echo chambers, and these echo chambers ultimately uh, lead to political dysfunction. They lead to insurrection. Uh, it's a weird time right now, and if we continue the behavior that has kind of crafted this dysfunction, I think that it will possibly get worse. I hope not. Right? It's hard to see it getting worse, but it could theoretically. Um, get worse. And then I also have here just jotted down quickly Mill's idea of higher and lower pleasures. I have to say that the self-righteous relief that I had when doing this was of the lower pleasures for sure. Transition. So I looked at contractualism. Um, no, because it is political in nature, right? A lot of these ideas are political theory. Um, Looking at like, contractarianism specifically, Hobbes, and a little bit of Plato. Um, Nature's chaos without a social contract, strength and intellect are meaningless. Talking about the idea that justice is the lesser of two evils, kind of, which is interesting from Plato. Um, that we should sacrifice freedoms for the lesser evil of justice. So basically, he's saying that committing injustice is pleasurable and good, but being at the wrong end of that injustice is not so great. Um, and we have to organize a society, and in Hobbes' opinion, a very strong uh, executive government to uh, enforce social morality. I have to say that I disagree uh, strongly with Hobbes, and kind of coming directly from the text. Again, he just was so pessimistic, man. He he really was pessimistic. I mean, he though in this current climate, sometimes the pessimism is felt. Right, you're talking about his three states of quarrel: competition, distrust, and glory. Man, does anything describe politics on either side right now more than competition, distrust, and glory? Uh, Man, but and because of that, we needed strong social, strong social contract. It's heavy because like that still seems to be the case, and we technically have a social contract. Um, the contractualism that I'm more aligned with is Locke and Rousseau and Rawls. They're more optimistic. For Locke, social contracts were mandated by money because it caused uh, people to consume more. And his idea prior to civilization or civilized societies and governments, we would have plenty of resources, and any quarrels would be decided by judges um, that would be democratically elected. And then Rousseau, um, he talks about like these ethical Neanderthals, and he thinks that actually society itself uh, is why social contracts need to exist. The idea that in our natural state there's empathy and self-preservation, and then in this modern society, that self-preservation turns into like an indulgence. Um, Interesting take. Rousseau's a weird guy. He's cool though. I dig Rousseau. Um, I got it written down here. Problem of modern society is the tension between authority and freedom. Again, wow. How much does that apply to right now? We talk about mask mandates and um, the potential of compulsory vaccination. Um, in his opinion, direct democracy was the solution, which we don't have here. I'm not going to dig into political thought too much, although obviously this is political in nature. But um, I'll move on to Rawls, who had this idea of the vow of ignorance. Um, Not really necessarily applicable here, um, but the two principles that come from it. Freedom principle basically stating equal rights to basic liberty compatible with similar liberties in other people, and then the equality principle: a person who is worse off in a society is better off than they'd be without said society. Again, it's hard to apply these specific principles, but I guess in the end you can say that they all agreed. Hobbes, Locke, Mill, Rawls all agreed on one thing, and that's freedoms must be sacrificed in order for a more just society to exist. Um, and that's kind of the argument that I think that I have with people who embody ideas different than mine. And I'd say that that argument is okay. Um, and if I mix all this together, right, you got virtue ethics basically telling me stay the course. If you find value in somebody, help help them see it your way. Meet in the middle, discuss, right? Deontology, same thing. Tell the truth. Um, but it's not moral to abandon. It's not. It's not in anybody's best interest. It's certainly not in the greater good. Consequentialism, right? And then contractualism, which actually does a good job of framing the argument from, I guess, what would be the political left right now. Uh, not to get not to get too in the weeds with the politics side of it. So that's what I have. I guess the easy uh, conclusion here is that it wasn't immoral, I think, for me to end that relationship those years ago. And I think that people who are doing this, though they feel righteous in their decision and they think that they're doing it for the right reasons, are ultimately being fairly selfish. Again, there are caveats to everything, but it feels to me that it's an easy solution to a difficult problem. And the easy solution generally isn't right. And I really take that, specifically from virtue ethics, deontology, and consequentialism. And I've always kind of mashed those three together to come up with my own ethical framework. Um, so I think I solved that issue. Little regretful, right? For previous actions. Appreciate your time. Uh, have a great day.